Okay, let's bring in the ABC's election analyst, Anthony Green, now. So, Anthony, this is the first opportunity we've had to have a chat to you since the election was announced. Set out the scene in the Parliament now, as it stands now.
Well, at the moment, the coalition have, well, it's actually, as of now, there's also a couple of independents who've resigned from their party over the last 3 years. But the basic starting point is Labor goes into this election with 72 seats that it won at the last election, and the coalition won 73 at the last election, if you count the WA National as part of the coalition, one of those complexities. But the coalition will almost certainly regain both New England and Lyne, which were held by Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott. So that gets them to 75, which is on the cusp of government in their own right. So they basically start this election campaign on the edge of government, where the Labor Party needs to win a couple of seats to get into government.
So Labor's basically starting 2 seats behind where they are now.
They are starting well, they're starting where they are now, but the coalition is basically starting ahead of where it is now because of the resignation of the independents.
So what are the seats we're going to be hearing a lot about over the next 5 weeks?
Well, you're going to hear, I think the key thing to talk about is a couple of the states other than New South Wales and Queensland, which are probably going to dominate this debate in the end. But Tasmania, the Labor Party is likely to lose seats, certainly the seat of Bass, maybe Braddon in the north. Lyons, one poll showed Labor behind, but you can't discount that Dick Adams would win that seat. So there's seats there that Labor will lose. Victoria, Labor had a record result last time. Julia Gillard was a local girl, or she certainly represented the city, and the Labor Party did very well in Victoria this last time. It's hard to see how they can hold on to all their seats this time. You'd expect their vote might decline slightly, and if that happens, there's 2 or 3 seats that are at immediate risk. Latrobe and Corangamite and Deakin are the 3 most likely to fall. They're all under 1.5%. So there's a couple of seats lost south of the Murray. Then you get to New South Wales, which was looking like a bloodbath while Julia Gillard was Prime Minister, and certainly we were looking at a repeat of what occurred at the last state election when Labor got a result that went back a century in terms of how big the swing was against them. That has diminished with the change of leadership. Clearly, Cleven Rudd is more popular than Julia Gillard, but still, Labor is likely to lose at least a couple of seats in New South Wales. Seats like Greenway and Lindsay in Western Sydney, which you're going to hear of endlessly. Robertson and DeBell on the Central Coast. DeBell, of course, which is held by Craig Thompson, the former Labor MP. So there are a bunch of seats which they can lose in New South Wales. And that's the starting point for Labor. They're on 72, need to gain seats, and in the southern states,
it sounds like a big task.
Their advantage is Kevin Rudd is a Queenslander. He's back in charge in the nation, and this time I think he's only the second Prime Minister ever from Queensland who's led their party to government.
But you're going to have to make up so many seats in Queensland if you're already losing that many in the other states.
Well, there are 6 seats under 3%, but each of them has a newly elected LNP member since the last election, so the LNP now have the advantage of incumbency in those seats. But you're talking about seats like Flynn in central Queensland, Brisbane in central Brisbane itself. They're 2 obvious seats which I think are likely. Herbert, Dawson, Longman. You're going to hear some of these seats mentioned over the next few weeks, and there'll be clearly already from that letter from the Liberal Party, they're talking about 1 forum in Western Sydney and 1 in Brisbane. So I think you're seeing pretty clearly that that's where the election campaign is going to be decided.
And you haven't made any mention of WA yet.
WA, Labor holds only 3 seats. It's expected at this stage they look like they're going to hold those 3 seats. They could win back Hasluck or Swan possibly, but realistically, the election polling closes there 2 hours after the eastern states. It may well be we know the result before Western Australia comes in anyway. And in South Australia, most of the margins have blown out there over the last few years. There could be quite a substantial swing in South Australia without many seats changing hands. Seats like Kingston and Macon and Wakefield, which were the marginal seats all through the Howard years, are now quite safe, massively safe for Labor because of the results of the last 2 elections. But I expect big swings, so who's going to win them? I think Labor would probably retain those seats. And up in the Northern Territory, you've got Lingiari and Solomon, which is Solomon's the Darwin-based seat. Lingiari is the Outback seat. The CLP have hopes of winning Lingiari, but I think the Labor Party would be hoping with Kevin Rudd back as leader, their chances in Solomon have improved.
Annabelle, we heard there from Anthony about the challenges Labor is facing in Tasmania. Why is it so bad for Labor in Tasmania right now?
Well, you've got a really pretty average economic situation in Tasmania. That's why you've seen Kevin Rudd talking about that quite a bit, talking about regional unemployment in Tasmania. That's something that's really drawn his attention in the last few weeks, and you can absolutely tell that he's mentioning that and turning his mind towards it because it's a real problem there, and obviously there are electoral implications.
It's also, at the moment, a deeply unpopular state government, and state politics is often fed into the trends in Tasmania. And when there's a deeply unpopular state government, the same happens at the federal level. So until now, those two things were really trending against Labor at the federal level as well, and I think that is an important factor. In the same way, Labor's unpopularity in New South Wales was a factor in the last federal election result and continues to be. Tasmania in particular. Tasmania does tend to swing by its own rhythms, and they do tend to be measured very much against how the state politics is running as well.
So, Annabelle, what's the likelihood of Labor picking up several seats in Queensland? I mean, based on the opinion polls now, it's pretty good, but what do you think the likelihood is will be on September 7th?
Well, it's certainly a better chance than anywhere else in Australia, I think it's fair to say. And the revival strategy, I mean, you've got two streams of thought here, I guess. You've got the national vibe thing, which is what I guess Kevin Rudd is campaigning on with this slogan, you know, a new way of politics. And that's, it's a very presidential style, it's a very whole of country style. If you go and look up the ALP website right now, big slogan says, "It's on," and there's about 5 pictures of Kevin Rudd. There's no doubt who the leader of this party is. It's got what looks like an American sort of style of stripes and lots of colour and lots of pictures of Kevin. But realistically, this task is a bit-by-bit task in different seats and different states where all the priorities and issues are different. Queensland is the most straightforward state in which the ALP could pick up seats with that national campaign and with Kevin Rudd, the local boy, as their icon.
But it's also complicated in Queensland because it's the one state where there's significant new parties. Palmer's United Australia and Katter's Australian Party are both running there.
Yes, we need to talk about those two.
And they are going to complicate the analysis in parts of Queensland. It may well be that the vote for both major parties is down in Queensland. And I can't see Katter will win his own seat. Maybe Clive Palmer may do very well in Fairfax. But I can't see them realistically winning any other seats. But they may get 5, 10, 15, 20% of the vote in some electorates. And their preferences and what happens to their preferences could be critical in some outcomes.